Hey everyone, welcome back to the Content Matters podcast. I'm happy to have with me today Regina Lynn Preciado. She's the VP of Content Strategy at Content Rules Incorporated. She leads content strategy teams to help organizations optimize content workflows and maximize the business value of their technology investments. Regina she has this great thing she gets to do, work with all these really great innovative companies in the world. And she's worked across verticals like financial services, life sciences, high-tech manufacturing, global franchises. And her expertise is like 25 years. So she is definitely an industry expert that we're happy to talk to today. She's an expert in structured content authoring, component content management, AI readiness, personalized content, content reuse, automation. Oh my God, we could keep going forever. And you say something in your bio, Regina, that I really have to ask you about. You live a dog spotting lifestyle. And I'm like, what on earth does that mean?
Yes. Thank you for that great introduction. And you are right. That is the most important. A dog spotting lifestyle, which my friends and I did before dog spotting became a famous thing to do, which is where when you're just out and about, and you're not necessarily expecting to see a dog, and you see a dog. And this is super exciting. So you ask permission of the owner to say, can I send a picture of your dog to my friend? And if they say no, or you can't ask them, you don't send a picture because you don't have consent. But you text your friend and you say, today I saw one husky and two beagles and a lab mix. And it is a way to bring a bright spot to somebody's day.
Yeah.
And back in the day, there was a big internet community around it. So, yeah.
That's cool. I have never heard of that, but I've certainly heard of other versions of that are not dog related, but I like the dog part of it anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're here on the podcast today. We're going to talk about how to design content systems, the models, the metadata, the workflows that keep information accurate, consistent, and up to date. And I think my first question for you, I think, is probably not the most important, but is really essential in that in many industries, the integrity of information is the business, but we don't really talk about it that way. How does it change the way organizations should think about content?
That's a great question. I think organizations need to think about content as a shared set of knowledge that is important to the business. And in many cases, content is sort of lumped under content, and it's something that's created in silos, and organizations might at the top have an idea that, well, we have technical documentation because we have to, obviously marketing's important, okay, customer support, whatever. And they're not thinking of it as an ecosystem where the content really either is a business asset or is the business.
Right. That's kind of that. And that's interesting. You could almost put it as a line item on your, not your income, not your financial state. Well, one of your financial, your balance sheet. Oh my God, I was trying to get that out and it was sticking in my tongue. It is an asset that you should manage like you manage your other assets.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay.
Yes.
So when we think of it in that way, we think we have to manage it. And a lot of the times, if you're in the industry, the content management industry, you like to throw around that term governance. But most of the companies that you talk to, they don't talk about this word governance. What does it actually mean for an organization to govern their content?
Yeah. I've really been thinking about that. And if you take a metaphor and you think about the rules of the road and how many of us can drive these gigantic vehicles that could be very dangerous, if you just didn't have any rules to follow. But most drivers agree to obey the paint. And when we travel internationally, the paint means different things. Like in the US or in California, we have white solid lines mean something, and white dotted lines mean something, and yellow lines mean something and I'm not even getting into what a stop sign looks like.
Yeah.
But most drivers agree to paint. And in fact, most edge cases are that result in risk or even disaster are when either people deliberately disobey the paint or something unexpected has gone wrong. A boulder rolls out from behind some cars and you hit it or something. So when we think about content, I think about governance is the paint and the signs and the kind of guidelines and rules that we all agree to follow so that everything fits together smoothly. The content is that you need is created in ways that can make that content fit together. I mean, you could really extend that metaphor and talk about merging. So I think governance in plain language is a set of guidelines and rules wherever something can be truly standardized and common that serves three purposes. And one, of course, is making the content relevant, findable, high quality. Another is stopping the churn of people making decisions over and over and over again because there's no thing to go look at to go, oh, yeah, that's the decision we made collectively. And then the third is a little more subtle, but governance is a way to connect that content to the business. Like those governance rules are really about what has business value and why do we create it and who owns it and where does it go and how long do we keep it. And if something's not valuable to the business, there won't be a rule for it. So to me, this ecosystem idea and the governance idea is all about helping us by providing some constraints. It helps us save time and make content that's truly valuable.
So if you have to break it down, then what are kind of the core elements of how you do governance?
How you do governance. I really think it comes down to, I really want to go simple and go two things. One is a librarian and the other is an editor-in-chief. Now, this can be in a large enterprise, the government team might be 20 people. That's kind of hard when it gets that big, but you have a core set of people whose job is to look at the content from what do we create under what standards, what are our content models that say we're going to create this content and put it in this order and send it here, all the way down to our terminology. What words do we use that give our business a voice? And then the librarian role is what labels are we going to use? What classification categories, or what categories are we going to use to classify our content and keep it all findable, get rid of duplication, or if we have duplication, make it sure it's meaningful. So those roles, to me, maybe are a little more friendly to a content ecosystem person than coming in and saying, we are governing your content.
Yeah.
Because it's really about content being findable and useful.
And are those two completely separate roles, or can the person play both roles? Like maybe it depends on how big the organization is, like, or is it just, it's just a role but not a person kind of thing?
They are roles, not necessarily a person. Often I see because I come in with kind of a content strategy perspective overall. So we develop a content strategy, which is a series of evaluating trade-offs and making decisions of what the strategic value of the content is and how we're going to achieve it. And then once that becomes, okay, we have our guiding light, this is what we're all going to work toward, the governance is kind of enforcing those decisions and helping us not go, what if we do something else all of a sudden? So often a content strategist will find herself in the role of the editor-in-chief or the librarian, or it becomes a slightly bigger team. You often have a core set of people who are kind of dedicated to the governance, and then you have representatives of other functions that on in a big team. I would say the third thing is that content governance needs to be aligned with data governance. And a lot of organizations that just, of course, have a data governance function don't realize how much content is different. There's a lot of overlap, but there's different. And so it's really good if those two roles talk to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're basically saying you've got an overarching content strategy that needs to be defined before you go to that next level and start defining how you look after and manage that content properly.
That is definitely I would say, an ideal. I mean, if you don't have a strategy and content is created in disconnected silos, and it's like every product team has this tech writer that sits with the team, or the engineers create it and there's an editor or something, you're now risking, you're creating unnecessary content, you're creating duplicate or redundant content, there's gaps in the content that someone didn't think of because there's no central sort of view
Right.
of this. So you get your strategy together to kind of unify everybody, and then proceed
From there.
from there. If
Yeah.
you don't have a strategy, I mean, if you're listening in and you're thinking, I can't get a governance board together, I can't get a strategy together, but you still really want to start easing your organization into this ever more increasingly important world of content management, you can start with terminology and a style guide. That is the old school, most basic way that teams of writers or content creators over the years have attempted
Yeah.
to agree on the paint.
Sometimes the baby steps are what you need. Okay. All right. So you mentioned findability, and that was kind
Yes.
of one of my questions. Was there's creating content, and there's content that making it findable and making it trustworthy. Like, what are the kind of the gaps that you have seen in the organizations you've worked with between the two of them?
I would say the most common gap is an almost universal perception among content creators that metadata is scary, annoying, or too much work.
Yeah.
I would say there's an unspoken sense too, or that findability is a front end concern. Oh, we create content, but the website or the document library or whatever, that's where they put the findability on it. And when you have a good unified content ecosystem that is governed, rolling that metadata and terminology and other things that improve your findability as upstream as possible with the source is super important. And I would also say that there's a tendency to either make a miscellaneous bucket because people haven't thought through findability and how do people interact or use this content and what for, or a tendency to think we're going to have to get to it later because creation is more important. And today, especially, I mean, I'm a writer, so I want creation to be most important. I make videos, and I know that the best content in the world, if you cannot find it, if your customer cannot find it in their time of need, it doesn't matter. People are much more willing to make some allowances in the content writing or quality if they can find it and it answers their questions.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand. I get that. That makes a lot of sense to me. Do you find that that's changing? Perceptions are changing now that we have AI that can come in and help create that content, or they don't, or put the metadata and the taxonomy and everything around it, but they don't, but there's no kind of thought behind what the underlying content really is. Like, does that question make sense?
Yes, I think organizations that are incorporating AI usefully are emphasizing, I'm not going to call it governance, but they're emphasizing a human in the loop. Like, what is human in the loop if not governance?
Yeah.
Looking at quality and findability. And yes, we have tools that can help us surface or suggest what might be good metadata. We have tools that are generating more content. What use is that if you can't find it? That there's sort of that chicken and egg thing of what comes first. And I, in recent years, have really been leaning on findability comes first, and then governance. Managing it, knowing what you have, maintaining it, keeping it up to date. AI is not good at going back through something and going, oh, wow, the product changed, and here's all the places we need to change it in the content. It's much better at going, never mind, I'll just generate something new. And now you have more content if you just go that route to be liable for and responsible for. So
Yeah.
you have to have some guidelines.
Is there kind of a first step that you need to take from And I know we keep saying the word governance, even though we said we weren't going to say
We
it.
don't call it that.
But it's like you're kind of stuck, right? The first step that they should take before they plug in any particular type of content model or content system, like, is there something that has to happen first before you take those next steps?
This is often more dependent on the organizational culture and the enthusiasm and understanding within the teams. So in some cases, I have started really basic with writing accessible content. And if you follow the principles of writing for global, like writing with translation and global users in mind, and writing for reuse, which I won't go into right now, but if you're interested, you could contact Barb or me because we have some papers we can send you. But if you take those perspectives, you can make the actual text that the AI tools and other findability tools are working with more predictable, which makes them more automatable. The other thing, so that's looking at it from a text point of view. The other thing is digital asset management is, managing your videos, your audio, your images. I already said that, image, video, audio, your rich media, as we used to call it. You really need to look at your metadata strategy there to make that content surfaceable and findable by humans and the tools that humans are increasingly building through AI. So getting very granular in the weeds with that does help, even if you are fighting against a tide, to put some content management guardrails and a governance committee in place for your organization.
Do you find that the organizations that you've kind of gone into forget about the rich media side of, kind of the governance model and spend more time on the text-based stuff?
Definitely teams of writers. And I'm guilty of this too in the past, of like getting kind of focused on the text. And right now, a lot of technical communication is still text-based, in part because we do want to translate and localize for global audiences, and in part because tradition, I think.
Yeah.
Videos are more awkward to manage. They're a little harder to update, or at least that's been the perception. So I do see part of the ecosystem and designing that content system to say, here's the content we create, here's who owns it, here's how we make it findable. Here's the starting all the way upstream with what value does it have to the business? How are we serving our customers or our constituents? When you start looking at it like that, then people start going, oh yeah, wouldn't it be great if we didn't have 13 individual instances of that one diagram and always have to figure out what's the most current and where is the versioning and where is the more and more people want pictures, more and more people want video, more and more people are using AI to craft their own journey through your technical and product and corporate communications.
Yeah.
So optimizing to serve those people, if that's your business, you need to think beyond text.
Yeah. And you kind of made a good point there that I liked is, we talk about the idea of answer engine optimization from a marketing content standpoint. And so you get surfaced up in Google overviews or ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you want, Perplexity. But more and more people are going to those tools to find technical information as well. It's like they aren't going to your website to figure out how to do something. They're asking ChatGPT to tell them, how do I use this product in this way? So does that change how you write and you think about how you design your content, your technical content?
Yes, we are seeing more technical and product documentation teams really looking at. Let me just take an example. It's a longstanding tradition to say things like, to do X, you need to have the following prerequisites, and then there'll be like a bullet list of the things.
Yeah.
And it turns out that AI processes that better if your line items have like a little heading, like a little bold or a little word with a colon of like system. And then the system needs to be a Macintosh. And then the next one would be like memory. You need this much memory or something like that, rather than just up at the top and some, that may not be like the best example, but thinking about being very, very explicit. AI does not do well with hidden meaning, implicit meaning, which goes back to writing for a global audience where we're like, avoid colloquialisms, be careful about idioms. One time I did a presentation where I did the whole thing in language of baseball. And I said, this is so inside baseball, nobody can understand it. And a lot of people hadn't heard the phrase inside baseball as the metaphor for this is such a insider jargon term of art, so those kinds of practices that we've had to make content accessible for humans, putting alt text on all the visuals, pulling the text out of the image so that it's separate, which helps for translation and things. All of those practices are still good. So I'm seeing teams that didn't adopt those practices before coming around and simplifying some of their models or document types, but also adopting a much more explicit and direct way of writing.
Yeah. It seemed it used to be, or we kind of looked at it like technical writing, product documentation writing was really simple. You just explain the product and that was that. And it's not quite that simple anymore. Like there's just too many other things to think about. And AI is just really thrown a severe wrench, I think, in the mix that kind of make you really rethink how you're writing and thinking about writing that content.
Yeah, I've been working with some organizations that are nonprofit mission-based organizations of providing scientifically evidence-based health information. So like information about heart health or cancer or diabetes, some of these big things. And it's been a classic for them to have articles or web pages that are like 5 myths about health condition. And what they were finding, of course, is people using, you can't even escape it. The Google overviews, the people using ChatGPT couldn't tell that what was the myth and what was the truth. So there's been some best practices about putting the most important information at the top. So that's like an old school news reporting inverted pyramid thing, right? Labeling everything very, very clearly. Like instead of here's 5 myths and then all your subheadings or your heading ones are the myths, which give them a lot of weight. Now you say myth, everyone should eat kale, fact, and it's in the same line, fact. Kale is only for some people or whatever. So looking at that from a stepping back, looking at the content you're creating, noticing your terminology, your writing standards, your voice, recognizing that there's only so much that the organization can do and how much responsibility or even liability that the organization would have based on what a public AI agent or GPT does. But definitely anything that a company, I go to a company website, it pops up, hi, I'm your AI assistant. What do you want to do? And I say, here's what I want to do. And it pulls from the data sheet and the quick reference guide and a user manual and an online help, and it puts something in order for me. Well, I'm going to expect that to be right because that company served that to me. And if I go do something and get hurt or break something, there's some risk there. So this is where technical communications and just organizational communications become, you want it to be a business asset, not a literal legal liability.
Yeah, really. And then you think about it, if a company is producing all of that different documentation and content across different groups, possibly because it's different, or different writers responsible for one type of document and another one responsible for like the admin guide versus the configuration guide versus the end user guide. And if they're not all writing in the same way and following the same rules, and then AI comes in and grabs it all, it can mash it up in ways that they wouldn't even have thought someone could read it that way and get that kind of incorrect knowledge from it.
Yes. And I think we being, the world and the world of communications here we're in a grace period in a way. of exploration, and knowing that the public isn't, none of us are fully AI literate yet. And we can argue about, well, actually, natural language processing is so good now, you don't have to use consistent terminology and so on. But that's not the only way that people are accessing the content still. And when they do trace it back, it needs to be what the organization, what is the language of this company.
Yeah.
And I was thinking in terms of designing a content system, and I think of that as an ecosystem, and how our tools, we can use different tools, we can use different output formats. Like a lot of companies produce PDF for very good business reasons that serve customers. They also need to produce HTML.
Yep.
They need to produce an AI accessible output that might be markdown wrapped in JSON or something, or YAML or something. And all of this is connected through that one level up of our terminology standards, our enterprise metadata, which will then have additional metadata for different purposes. The technical communications and hardware engineer is going to have a different set of metadata than the marketing image assets on top of the enterprise metadata. So I see the governance as the way to connect everything and support this ecosystem and interdependencies to help silos align to something, even when they don't have time to talk to each other, or, even when their content doesn't ever technically intersect from group to group. It has always intersected from the customer side, and now it's doing that on a massive scale because of the AI pulling things together.
Yeah. So there's that. I mean, that was a lot of different levels and things that you kind of explained there. How do you, when you go into an organization and you help them, how do you figure out where do you get started? Like, how do you get started?
That's such a great question. And that, again, I hate to say it, but the answer is it depends. Often we used to almost always get started with the content itself, because that's a missing piece. People will look at workflow, which is super important, and people will look at taxonomy or metadata sometimes, and they talk to people, they forget to look at the content. So content models would be rules about where do you chunk it, thinking about your content as a set of question and answer pairs, where the title implies a question and the body answers it, which, that's a topic-based authoring best practice. Chunks are smaller today. They're more granularly tagged. But so starting there and then building out. Okay, now we know what content we have. That gives us a clue into what metadata we need, which gives us a clue into what classifications or categories we'll put that metadata in, which gives us a clue to connecting that content to the business, connecting the content to customers. And now we really have to help people develop a new workflow, because if you take this new tech and this new way of looking at content and you put your old process in there and you recreate your legacy process, even by accident, in a new tool, that doesn't work. You've got to roll up and say, well, what are we trying to achieve? Is that still valid? And here's a new way of working. So that is a classic way to start with content, roll up to metadata, roll up to workflow. However, of late, we're finding that organizations want to start with workflow because they don't know where the tech is going to go. And we've had some conversations recently of going, we don't know. We're in pilot phase. We're looking at AI. We're looking at guidance coming out from regulatory bodies, like in the healthcare space and the financial services space, of where you can and can't use AI to do this and that, where you have to have a human in the loop and so on. So in the meantime, we're looking at what workflows change. And yes, this is still going to be in an old tool, or that might still be written in an older way. But what is our future of how we're going to work? And then we'll roll back to the content. So in my practice, that's relatively new. That used to be an outlier, and now it's a little bit half and half.
That's interesting, and actually I get that a lot, because you hear about with AI, top-down leadership saying you have to use AI,
Yes.
figure out how you use AI, and so these leaders are stuck with saying, well, how do I implement this technology and these tools in my thing? And so they're just looking at the technology, and they're not thinking, they don't have time because they're under pressure to kind of back up and start from the right way to look at it, which is, it's not the tool, it's what can the tool enable you to do. So you need to rethink what your process was like and how it can be better or different with these new tools.
Yes. And a lot of the knowledge that is, if we think about knowledge capture and you think, well, maybe now we have a tool that can run some natural language processing against it to say, hey, you should change these terms to our updated terminology, or oh, here's our style checker, and it's a AI thing that sits there and pops up or just changes it for you. So the writing itself maybe is there's more tooling for that. But the knowledge that's captured, whether that's data or a conceptual description or tasks and instructions on how to do things, like that has to be correct. And so a lot of that kind of work that has been traditional for technical communicators to do, sort of the engineers figure something out or the product teams figure something out, there's specs, there's interviews, and then you put it together. A lot of that's moving, I'll call it upstream in the workflow. Like now your knowledge engineer is sitting right up there with the product team, and as the product team is making decisions and testing things and then going, yeah, okay, this is how this is going to work, the communicator is right there making sure that knowledge is captured and tagged and in the right place, because the systems are doing some of the transformation later on.
Right.
So you still have the function. It's just, instead of things happen up here and they come down to you and then you edit and write, gaps, you're doing that further upstream, and the company doesn't necessarily think of it as writing anymore.
Yeah.
But it's still communicating.
And that's actually an interesting point, that technical writers, their roles are evolving as well, that they're not just sitting at a screen editing something that an engineer wrote or writing the content themselves. There's new ways and new ways of thinking of how they actually approach their jobs these days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
no, I was gonna talk about roles, and that's probably leading into that. Like, what does the technical writer do today, and what other roles are important to have when you start designing these content systems?
When you're designing these systems, a lot of what I see too is the tech folks are in charge of the AI initiatives, and the AI initiatives impact greatly whether the technical communications has been happening in documents or in a component-based system or in a structure like DITA. However that's been happening, it is all impacted. And there's certainly an idea that AI can do all the transforming now. So as long as the knowledge is captured, AI can put it together and make outputs and do things. Like, there's this. So companies that are being very successful at this are leveraging the expertise their technical communicators have in communications, connecting the business value to the end consumer of that information. Could be employees, partners, consumers, customers, prospects, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that ability to understand the two communication, right? It's two or more beings sharing and understanding an idea. It's the best simple definition I can make.
Yeah.
Companies that have laid off all their tech writers and said, oh no, we'll just have AI make manuals from our data sheets, are sort of finding out that didn't actually work that well. And whether that's because they didn't plan it or because it's actually, you need that human in the loop, you need that governance. They're not doing as well at it as the people who really took that knowledge of communication and moved it upstream.
Yeah. one of the kind of roles that I think is really interesting for the technical writing team today is um, understanding more about how the customer relates to the content that's written and
Yes.
available, and finding the gaps, and understanding more, is this really good content? Are they getting what they need? Where are the gaps, so that we can fill in those blanks and make that experience better? And I think maybe before they didn't have those opportunities, and today with the AI systems working the way they do, they get that information faster and better, and they can actually do more with what they're doing.
Yeah. And if you think about it, why would customers even need to use? Why would we, let's just say, as a technical company, need to provide an AI interface on our documentation website? Why is that? Findability.
Yeah.
Because a customer, they might know I have product A. And so I have the whole user's manual for product A, and I have the data sheet, and I have the quick start guide, but I've already started. Now I'm doing something later on and I got in trouble and I need to figure out how to get myself, something, either it's broken or I did something wrong. So they're already like, I have to finish this in the next hour. And I can, so then I go, and the worst is I have an 800-page PDF that I have to look through.
Yeah.
But most technical, maybe it's HTML. Well, we need to offer them this ability to make their own journey, to say, here's the exact thing I'm trying to do. And it's going to go through different stuff. And if our own AI isn't finding or retrieving the right information, or it's putting things together from product A version 1 and product A version 10,
Mm,
we
trouble.
might have a problem too.
Yeah.
So technical communicators are the ones who can start watching this and look for this and figure out where's the gaps. The gap right there might be, oh, we didn't give anybody the versioning tag, something so simple. But it could be we never knew customers are trying to do that, so we never wrote up anything. So now we have to write something, because the AI cannot create; it can only derive.
Yes. So AI is definitely changing a lot of stuff. Like, how do you see the role of governance kind of changing over the next few years?
I think people who have managed to not think about it, or to put it off, or to say we're too small or we're too big or every silo is going to do it themselves. I think there's a real come to realization moment of, we need to know what content we have, and we need to align to standards, which isn't a very exciting way to say it, except for those of us who love like
Yeah.
that. But um, because because AI is emphasizing everything we're doing well and everything we didn't get around to. And I hate to say it, because a lot of teams are like, we know our content is weak in this area, but we've never gotten around to it. We have this backlog. We don't have leadership support. And we have to be careful, because we do not want the message rolling up that, oh, well, what were you even doing? Like, people take for granted all the very, very good and important work they've been doing in their own process and way. And they need to roll it up to a centralized um, uh, perspective of the ecosystem, and look at the interdependencies and prioritize findability, and then accuracy, then findability, then completeness.
So if you had to get organizations to change just one habit about how they handle their content, what would it be? What would you like beg them to start doing today?
That is an excellent question.
That's a big poll.
I would
Oh, I stumped her.
I would beg them to um, I'm leaning in on the metadata,
Yeah.
because a thing that is a risk is letting any old AI come in and go, yeah, you know what, I'm going to chunk this at every 256 characters, and I'm going to consider these tokens, and they're like, I don't know, 4 characters each, and da da da. I'm going to do all this, and then I'm going to try to derive meaning in a conversational way that soothes somebody's ego, and tells them, oh, that's a great prompt, and here, I just love to answer your prompt. I think we really need to put some. I like the word practice. It's a practice, it's a discipline. It's kind of like in connecting content to need. And I think more and more that's coming from metadata. I'm leaning a little bit towards chunk your content better into question and answer pairs that are knowledge assets, but I think I'm leaning more metadata. I don't know. We'll have to do this again in a couple months and see.
I will. I'll come back and ask you that and see how it's going. You must really enjoy your job. Like, and I say this to anybody who's kind of working in the content, any kind of a content aspect, and they're trying to figure out AI. It's like, it's just an exciting time to kind of see how it's impacting the way you work and making you rethink and kind of redesign how your processes work and stuff.
It's certainly been a great catalyst for helping organizations get the help they need, because also there are established, proven ways to make this transformation that, yes, there's tooling. Some things go even faster. You can leap over some of the painful learning and pitfalls that other companies have experienced. So in that sense, yes, I think we do have a risk that in all the shiny new about AI, that some of the really valuable work that gets done is also getting lost. Like, you do still need to keep producing this, that, and the other thing. This is on top of. But I think it helps people think of things in a different way and see the truth, which is everything is connected.
Yeah. This is a really great conversation. And I'm going to encourage people to go to Content Rules, your website, and kind of see some more of that content that you share with people and the work that you guys are doing over there, because I think a lot of companies need that kind of support as they're moving forward today. So thank you, Regina, for being with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you to Ingenix/DiscoverCX. They are the sponsor for the podcast. Ingenix helps companies make content easier to create, manage, and deliver so customers can find the answers they need. And DiscoverCX is a platform by Ingenix that's kind of like component content management. Helps you manage technical documentation, support portals, help docs, write once, reuse everywhere, pull content together from different sources, publish to any channel. You can check out discovercx.com or ingenix.com to learn more about those products and platforms. And when you're there, sign up for the newsletter, because we let you know what's coming up in the podcast in the coming episodes, and other content. We actually we try to produce a lot of really great content in these industries to help people kind of do their jobs better. So yeah. So thank you, everyone. Again, thank you, Regina. I really appreciate it. And everyone have a great day.